And when she is not doing content design or writing books, you can find her exploring Washington State wineries or hiking with her husband and her rescue dog, Rufus. So please join us in giving Erica a warm Content Strategy Seattle welcome. And Erica, please take it away.
Thank you. Speaking of rescue dog, there might be some, I always give this warning, my dog is loud. He might participate. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here. Gonna start the screen share. The book actually came out yesterday, so really excited about that. It's been a long time coming. Like you said, it was 2 years ago that I first presented at the meetup, and this work grew out of a bunch of workshops I did, mostly at Microsoft. That really helped the content team get a lot more visibility and brought a lot more energy to our work and got more attention from product marketers, fellow researchers. Hats off to all the researchers. And yeah, it was a good thing. And I just wanted to share that positive energy by, spending 18 months writing a book. So yeah, it's 300 pages. It's quite heavy. You can use it as a barbell if you need to work out as well. It doubles as a heavy object. But yeah, very excited to get this out there, and I'm still in shock that it happened, but here we are. Oh, and I'm gonna see if my navigation is working. I only have one monitor, so I'm gonna keep my navigation here to keep my head on straight. But here we go. Can you see my screen okay, everyone? Okay. I think this is sort of half humorous, but doing content research is a way to manage conflict within product teams. It's a great way to solve conflicts among people with strong opinions. And that's often what we see when we're working on a product team. Whether you're in content strategy, content design, content marketing, everyone's got an opinion, and content research can help put your customer at the forefront of all the conversations you're having and really save you time, cut to the chase, help you do work faster. It is a little bit of an investment in your time, but I think it's kind of magical, the things you can learn. Very, very mind-blowing insights that you can find when you do it. I'm kind of joking here too. I know I'm promoting my own book, but I am going to mention a whole bunch of other authors and other amazing books, some of which will be familiar. Hopefully some will be new to you. But these have also informed the work that we're going to be talking about tonight. I'm going to just reshare the Twitter handle and social media handle. Please promote. So here's what we're going to cover. What is content research? It is a sprawling field. Why should you do it? How do you do it? What content should you dive into and investigate with research? How to find the time. If you're working in content, you're probably supporting a whole bunch of projects and a whole bunch of teams. I was talking to a content designer who was supporting, there's a 17-to-1 ratio of product managers to content designers on her team, and she's a little frazzled, understandably. How do you find time when you're spread thin to do something like content research? How to manage stakeholders, and how to share your impact, and how to drive impact, and how to share your business results. And without bragging, without hurting people's feelings, I think it's important to be tactful as you go forth and do this work. Yeah, when you're doing content research, you need to do a little bit of getting your house in order. This is, how do I say, if you're going to do some content research, you're going to have to ask yourself some hard questions about the lay of the land of your content world, and call this Go Hio at Amazon. Getting our house in order. What do we mean by good content? How do you know what do you mean when you say your content's effective? What does that really mean? What do you stand for as a content team? Do you have any heuristics or content standards or principles? These are hairy topics. These are philosophical questions that sometimes don't get answered, and content teams, when they're so slammed, they sometimes don't have the chance to dive into these things, but I think they're important to think about before you dive in and say, I'm going to evaluate my content, I'm going to research and get to know my customers better and understand what's on their minds. If you're trying to improve your content, you need to know what you mean by good or great content. I'm just going to pause there for a minute. It's a can of worms. It's a can of worms, but it's a good can of worms to jump into. I'm going to stop right here. Any questions there? Can you hear me okay, number one? And any questions right here that I can answer off the top of the bat? Off the top of, what's the expression right now? Any questions I can answer right now?
We can hear you just fine, which is great. I haven't seen any questions pop up in the chat.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, yeah. Ohio, that's an Amazon expression, but getting your house in order, think about it. What do you mean by good content? Do you have, maybe raise your hand, who's got content principles on their team right now? Okay. All right. Yeah. If you have them documented, oh, awesome. Christine, good. If you've got content principles to jump off from, then you got a foot in the door. You're already on your way to digging in. But yeah, it's is that a question, or is that just you're saying yes, you have them? Was that Christine? No, the hands down. Okay, let's keep going on. I think another thing that I think about before diving into content testing, I hate to stop us before we dive in, but thinking about plain language, here is Sarah Richards, who wrote the book on content design. She is a strong advocate of plain language. If you are advocating for plain language in your organization, power to you. Sometimes you don't need to do content testing if you're making sure that your content is abiding by plain language guidelines. So Sarah's got hers documented. These readability guidelines are amazing. I've heard from people all over Europe that this is like their style guide. This is a style guide they use. Here are a bunch of resources you can dive into to get into, like, what do we mean by plain language? Making sure that your sentences are short, you're using clear verbs, you're not using fancy language for the sake of being fancy pants, which sometimes your marketers will ask you to do. Ooh, any marketers on the call? I don't want to be insulting anyone, but sometimes we're asked to use, fluffy language that isn't direct because a marketing team likes content like that. And here's the US version of plain language. This is really important to think about as you go forth and test. You might not want to invest your time in content research. If you can make over your content, make it align with plain language guidelines, that's a really smart use of your time too. So plain language is communication that your audience can understand the first time they read it. Which, this is difficult. This is difficult to achieve. Easier said than done. Pro tip. One resource, this is one of the many books that I'm going to be mentioning tonight, Yellow Elise Douglas. That is a very interesting name. She is a professor of writing. That sounds like a dream job. This is her book on the neuroscience behind understanding language, which requires a whole bunch of at least 3 different parts of your brain work together to help you understand language. So reading online is hard, reading period is hard, but reading online is extra hard. Her book is all about making syntax simple, helping clarify your sentences and phrases so they're easily understandable the first time your customers or audience read them. She's great. This book is being revised, I think, next year. If you can find a copy, it's sometimes a little difficult to find, but if you can track one down, this is just, I find, a gold mine. Sometimes I will give it to product marketers, so product managers and other researchers on my team or other teammates, product designers, to help them understand what it takes to make content simple and straightforward and understandable. It's a lot of work. When people say everyone can write, who's heard that? Has everyone heard, oh, anyone can write? That is so not true. And this book highlights just how difficult it is and all the thinking and all the elements. And yes, there's grammar and sentence parsing and lots of good information in this book that will make your head hurt. But if you follow her guidelines, your writing will be much more clear. And another book that I want to give hats off to is David Dylan Thomas's Design for Cognitive Bias. Checking your biases as you dive into this work is super important. He's so great. He's great to follow on Twitter. His book is just chock full of all the different biases that we bring to our life every day and how you have to think of them when you're doing your UX work, when you're doing your content development. Confirmation bias, sometimes when you're doing research, you might have an underlying motive to find, to confirm your thoughts, to say like, oh, if I think this is the right title for this piece of content, or this is the right description, or this is the right call to action, if you're going to try to confirm your own hunch, that's something you need to watch out for. Stakeholder bias, if you've got stakeholders, they also have their, they've got skin in the game. They might have a motivation for getting results from your research that aligns with their worldview. And recency bias, if people have seen content, if they've participated in research recently, or if they've been on your website recently, that can also skew the results you get. So lots of different biases to think about. All right, so if you're thinking about simple language, if you're thinking about your biases, you can start thinking about what content to research. And this is another one of those cans of worms. What is your most important content? What content should you evaluate with content research? It's not always your homepage. It's not always the splash page of your app. Au contraire, I think this is going to be harder to answer this question with the changes in Google Analytics. If you have analytics at your company, great. If you can define this, power to you. I'd love to turn it over to the audience for a second. Does anyone watching want to say if they know for sure what their most important content is? Anyone want to come off mute and jump in and tell me? Can you confidently say, what's the most important content that you work on? Is everyone being shy or is everyone stumped? Is everyone stumped? Oh, hold on, something's going on with my navigation, hold on. Yeah, I think this is a big stumper. Hold on, let me navigate to where I need to be.
A couple of folks added some stuff in the chat. I know
Oh,
that,
it's in the chat, okay.
yeah, Carolina says that the empty states are the most important content in her work. Kristina says it's the registration flow. At Tracy Taylor for what she works on, it's the quarterly release updates. Wendy Zucker says the payment flow. Swati says the payment flow and the cart and the checkout. Yeah. Onboarding flows, those are important too.
They are very important, yes. Answering this question can be a stumper. If you know what the most important content is to your team, to your company, fantastic. If you can't answer that question, that's okay. It can require collaborating with your product managers, with those on your team to understand what should you dive into. This is a real stump in the Olympic Peninsula. For those of you who don't live in the Pacific Northwest, this is real. This is somewhere in the Solduck, the Solduck River and the Olympic Peninsula. But yeah, it can be a stumper. If you know, this is great. That's great. Yeah, it's a can of worms. It can be a can of worms. All right, so let's dive into ways that you can dive in and evaluate what is working with your content, what is not, what is understandable to your audience, what is a little fuzzy, what is a lot fuzzy, what is potentially even offensive. And I'll get into an example of that in a little bit. The scrappy way to dive into your content, you don't need any fancy platform like user testing or user Zoom. You can just go ask your friendly neighborhood customer experience team, customer service team. They have a lot of data, typically. Some of it doesn't go used. Some of it is just sitting there for the customer experience team to use that your content team can take advantage of and learn so much. I haven't met this guy because it's only my 8th day at Chewy, but this is the person who I'm going to hit up and say, hey, give me all the data that you have from the chatbot. Give me all the data you have from the phone calls. Can we look at the transcripts from those phone calls and see what patterns are emerging? This is free. You don't need any money to do this. You just Slack them, message them and say, hey, hello, I'm your friendly content designer. I need some help. Voice of customer surveys. If you're using Customerville, if you've got any dashboards, survey results from them, you send emails, anything related to the customer experience, this is great. Net Promoter Score can be helpful too. I say that with a big old asterisk because Net Promoter Score can be a slightly squidgy metric that can be hard to parse. I think a lot of people latch onto Net Promoter Score as the be all end all metric that user experience teams should align themselves to. And I really disagree with that strongly because you can improve your user experience and have your Net Promoter Score go down. But if you have qualitative feedback from Net Promoter Score surveys, that's something great to dive into. And industry reports, if you've got Gartner, Forrester, Mintel, it's a little marketing-y. Get your hands on any of this stuff. And if there are any call outs about the customer experience specific to content, this is free for you to use and dig into. And if any of it's critical, you can go forth and improve it. And I think customer service calls are just gold mines. You can understand things. You can get close to your customer, understand what's bothering them, what's unclear to them, and go forth and fix it without any expensive tools. this is from Nielsen Norman Group. This is a typical breakdown of a customer service. This pie chart of what a customer service team is looking at in terms of issues that they're seeing, missing information. For this example, customers are complaining that there's information missing on the website that prevents them from doing their jobs to be done. Digging in there, finding those gaps is gold. It's gold. And if you can fix those things and then quantify how you're improving the customer service, get this pie chart to look different next quarter, 6 months from now, if you can influence pie charts like this with content that shows directly the influence of your team, the impact of your team on the customer experience, on your company's bottom line, usually. Can someone here tell me, do you know how much it costs for a contact to your customer service team? Do you know on average what a phone call or a live chat costs your company? Jessica, is it $5.26? Looking in the chat. Anyone have that information handy? I've worked places where it's almost $75 for a customer service call. So $50, yeah, it's up there. I mean, it can take a long time for customer service representatives to solve a problem. Having that number is a really handy number to have so you can calculate your impact. So there's an example I have in my book where my coworker, Trudy, I worked with her to run a couple content investigations with user testing on the invoices at Microsoft. They were missing information. People were not trusting how Microsoft was billing them because they weren't transparent about it. And once we added very complicated mathematical formula of how we bill you every month, it's, there's tax and then there's a discount and then there's some other, there's this complicated formula. We didn't calculate it for them, but we just put the formula on the invoices. And that led to this dramatic drop in customer service calls. And if it's $75 a pop, that's expensive. So she updated the invoices, and the next month there was such a dramatic drop in calls and contacts to customer service that she's saving Microsoft $2 million a year. $2 million a year. And that was 2 years ago. So she saved Microsoft, cumulatively $4 million, you could say. That's humongous. And Wendy's here in the audience. Hi, Wendy. Wendy knows Trudy. It was really powerful to say, hey, we need more information on these invoices. The design team said there's no room for it. We can't squeeze it in. You're mucking with the design. And with all respect to the designers everywhere in the world on the call here, we had to squeeze in that information. We had to make the content longer to make it clearer, to drive the trust with the customer so they'd stop calling. So they go, oh, you're not fooling me. You're not taking more money than you should. It was this, I don't know, like you could hear like a timpani drum, just the PM, the core team working on that project could not believe the impact of adding a little bit more content to an invoice. To me, it's a no-brainer. Like, yeah, you want to know where your money's going. And this is also during COVID, where companies were very cost conscious, as they are now, with layoffs and all that. They didn't want to be spending a dime extra than they had to. They wanted to know if they were spending too much, if Microsoft owed them money. Once we got their trust, that was huge. Yeah, Wendy's saying, yep, it was really cool. It was a nice meaty project that showed the impact of content. Let me go back to where I was. I just want to make a call out. I don't know if I should apologize. I just want to acknowledge that Nielsen Norman is a controversial source of information. There's been a lot of chatter on Twitter about Don Norman in particular not being very sensitive to women and Black women in particular. I just want to acknowledge that Nielsen Norman is a controversial source of information, and I'm trying to limit my use of it and use Baymard and other sources of UX. I don't want to say thought leadership, but Baymard is something I can put in the chat. It's I feel like a resource for UX research and documentation that I'm finding to be more useful than Nielsen, which is a good thing. So I don't know if people have seen that Twitter chat about Nielsen Norman, but just want to acknowledge the lack of diversity in that company and lack of sensitivity from Don Norman. All right, so if you want to do customer research a different way, if you have content that you know hasn't been evaluated, that you don't have data on it, but you're curious about how it's performing, you can interview customers. You can use your customer service team to reach out to them. Please get approval from your legal team before you do this. In some industries, the risk of getting personally identifiable information or PII from your audience is an issue. You don't want to be causing problems for your company from content research. So make sure that you get clearance from your lawyers if you have to. If you work in finance or certain industries, you probably already know if this pertains to you. If you have any question, please ask first and don't get yourself into trouble. Closed testing is sort of like Mad Libs. This is a way to test clarity. This is an example from Meta or Facebook where you can take a chunk of content, remove like every fifth or every seventh word, and see if your customers can fill in the blanks. This is kind of a gauge of cognitive load, a gauge of how simple or straightforward or understandable your content is. This is time consuming, but this can be very helpful if you were launching a new product or you've got help content. If you've, I think I was just on Amazon's help page recently where the help articles were just not very helpful. And if there's an article that people are referencing time and time again, if you know you've got like the most popular help content on your site, this is something that you can do to evaluate and see if it's clear or if it needs an extreme makeover to be more clear. Another way to do content research is to use an online platform. User Zoom is one of them. User testing is another. They are merging. There's going to be a lot of changes with these two, but I'm excited about it to see what's going to happen there. User testing has an online university that is chock full of resources if you have a subscription. It used to be free. They put it behind a paywall, which is unfortunate, but there is a lot of guidance online from these two. And I'm going to share a quick example from, hold on, let me make sure. Yeah. I want to share an example to bring this to light. A lot of people are like, well, what do you mean? How do you do it? How do you do content research with these platforms? I like to do the 1-2 punch of asking a quantitative question and following it up with a qualitative question. So get a number, like ask a multiple choice question so you know like what % of participants are answering a certain way. And then ask an open-ended question about tell me why you think that way. And this is an example from Intuit. Hats off to Intuit for their content design resources that are online, which are amazing. Mentioned these in my book. They wanted to know about how do you capture receipts? What do customers want to call this feature? And there's receipt capture and receipt snap. Receipt capture. What's up with these? I think they wanted to know which were preferable. The team decided that these were the two contenders that they wanted to get feedback from their customers on which was preferable. And it turned out more people preferred capture because they thought it was formal and professional and, business-like. You capture your receipt, very straightforward. But receipt snap, the feedback that they heard from those participants in this particular study, they said it was easy. They felt it was understandable, but it was friendly. And this is the key word where they made a decision from their online research where they said, okay, more people preferred capture, but the qualitative feedback about Snap led them to choose Snap. So Receipt Snap is the name of their feature. I'm sorry if I'm triggering anyone who has not yet done their taxes, but Receipt Snap is the feature that Intuit, that's the name of the feature, because it was more aligned with their brand. So they had to think about their branding guidelines. Yes, they're a friendly brand. This is one of their brand tenets. So Receipt Snap was the quote winner of this content test that they did on. So I thought this is kind of an interesting example to share. Any questions I can answer right now? Just pausing real quick. Any burning questions that people want answered right now? Is everyone being shy?
We had somebody want the link to the Baymard Institute.
Oh, the Baymard, thank you. Yeah, Baymard. I actually hadn't heard about them until recently because I think it's one of those, you can get a subscription to, the more expensive version of it. But I found a lot of their research to be both more comprehensive and just feels good. Feels good to, maybe it's a voice and tone thing. I'm just finding, really loving having access to Baymard and finding a lot of really interesting content on that site.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love to have that resource available in addition to, or, stuff of
Totally. Yeah. Nielsen, I'm very, I'm very upset at Don Norman's behavior. I'll just say that. I'm sure some of you on the call are probably familiar with what I'm talking about, but I feel like he's been very insensitive. And Nielsen Norman needs to deal with that. Oh, hey, Katie. Katie's got her hand up. Do you want to go ahead, Katie?
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, go for it.
Yes, I just had an issue unmuting myself.
Mute, good old mute.
So I was wondering, and maybe I should just read your book. It was delivered, I think, yesterday. It was really funny because my husband because I bought it from my husband's account, and he was like, is this a phishing mail? And I'm like, no, this is actually a book that I purchased. So basically what I wanted to ask is, like, these researches, we don't have a lot of opportunity at my company to do user research. And I'm wondering, do you or Intuit, if you know, do they leverage like a research panel, a constant research panel? They have a pool of users that they can reach out to at the time. Is that how it happens?
There's several ways you can do it. So if you want to if you sign up for user Zoom or user testing, and you're interested in leveraging their global reach, and there's another slide about that. User testing's reach is not quite global. They can reach people in many countries, but there are gaps. You can use their participants. They have you can target it by location, language, age, socioeconomic status. So we get it gets a little sensitive and controversial. If you have a typical customer that you're looking to get feedback about, and they say they live in the United States and they are Mac users, and you're looking for specific information about them, you can target your test to people in that category who reflect the elements that you're looking for, like persona wise. The more specific you get, the longer it will take you to get those participants to complete, to be found and then to complete your test. I have found that you can often, if you have a general audience that you're looking for, you can target people who show up within minutes. And then within an hour, if you have 10 or 20 participants, you have a whole bunch of information to go on. If you have customers who, or if you see people in those targeted groups who are very eloquent or very knowledgeable about your product or not knowledgeable about your product, if you want to retarget tests in the future to those people, you can recruit them. You can put them in your recruit group and keep, have them as like your preferred participants. That's something that you can do. It's really, really convenient. There are other websites that you can use to recruit people to participate. I find, sometimes it's handy to do a test to potential customers and to current customers and see the differences. That would be like an audience specific sort of test, but there's so many ways you can do it. It's really fascinating. Sometimes you'll get, how do I say it? A clown. Sometimes you'll get someone who really has no business participating in a study. I think of my son is 20, he's in college. Like, some people sign up to participate in these online tests just for beer money. I'll say it like that. Let me just say it just to be very blunt. You will get some people who you might need to throw out a participant or two because clearly they have no business being there or they're not aligned. You can tell from their responses that they're not quite who you're looking for. Throw that out. You get another participant. You just let the platform know, no, please replace this one. Get me another person who is going to provide the feedback that I'm looking for. So yeah, it's convenient, but that comes with the caveat of we want to be inclusive. We want to be sensitive. If you're testing with all white people, that's not inclusive. So you need to be careful and sensitive. As the convenience of these online platforms is immense, but you also need to check your biases and think hard about who are your customers, who's the audience you're looking for. Are those participants aligned with that? Are they diverse enough? Or do you need to keep looking and keep hunting and tweak a little bit?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'm a little concerned about the email spam, the phishing comment you had. I will let Rosenfeld know if the people who bought the online version of my book, you should have received a link yesterday. So let me know if there's a problem. Maybe it's maybe they need to content design their email program.
The problem is that it didn't say what was delivered. So and it just came to me that
okay.
Amazon sent this, and I and I checked the email address.
Oh,
It
was it
was
an Amazon thing?
Amazon.com, and I'm like, what? Wait, it must be Erica's book. And I checked my Kindle, and it was delivered. And I checked over the weekend, it wasn't there. So he was just a little bit concerned that it might
Words
fish.
matter, don't they? Okay,
Yeah.
I can see that. So it's not a Rosenfeld issue, it's an Amazon issue.
It's an Amazon issue, yeah. Yeah, and it's really funny because I usually don't get, or do I? So it's usually I get emails, not my husband. It's really interesting. This is an outlier, and it was very interesting.
That sounds like a content strategy challenge.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Anyone from Amazon on the call? I know there are former Amazonians on the call. I see Kristina. Yeah, well, maybe we can email Andy Jassy and have him fix that. We're here in Seattle. So this could be an all-day workshop, just digging into these types of research questions, but I will just summarize them here. There are a whole bunch of things that you can test. Preference tests, like we just saw with the Intuit example. Do people want to do receipt snap or receipt capture? That was actually a naming and a preference test combined. So, what should you name a feature? What should you name a product? I'm thinking about, have you ever had to work with a product name that's just awkward and you don't like it and you think it's affecting your conversion? This is where you can partner a little bit with your marketing team and collaborate with them to make sure that the products and features on your site and app are named appropriately, engaging, clearly, all that. This is a great collaboration opportunity. Audience specific, like I said, you can test with different people. Are they current customers? Are they lapsed customers? Were they previously customers and they gave up and they, abandoned you and went to the competition? That's a great audience to test with. Clarity and comprehension testing. Is something clear enough? And if not, why? That why is really like where the golden nuggets of information, of insights really often crop up. Actionability, how likely are you to look at, you can show like a call to action, or you can show a screen grab from your experience and say, how likely are you to take the action that's here on the screen? Are you going to click on that CTA button or on that link? Or are you not engaged? Or is it not clear? Why not? And that's for like onboarding flows, like we mentioned, for most important content. That's super important. You want people to create accounts so you get personalization and information and you can customize your user experience. Actionability research is super, super fun and enlightening. Completeness, gap analysis. I see this and Intuit too, if they always ask you, did you get all the information you needed from, you asked a question or you were doing a task online, did you have all the information you needed? They're always doing content research on, is there a gap in the information or is it complete? Is it too much information? Is there too much content and just, turning people off, or they're doing a little TLDR on you? Gap analysis, content research is really fun. I'm such a nerd. I think it's fun, but I do truly think it's fascinating to understand what your audience needs, what you're not giving them. Give them the information they need, and you'll see your metrics change. Hedonic and emotional response research is also important and really, really good to do just on your words. Decouple your content from your design and ask people, how does this word make you feel? Does it elicit any emotion? No emotion? That's fine. That's great. Maybe you don't work for a product or a brand that lends itself to any sort of emotional response from your customers. Maybe that's what you're looking for, is a neutral response. Is someone getting upset by your content? I hope not, but you never know. You never know what people are, what's going on in their minds, what might be triggering them by your words. And competitive analysis, analyzing your content, especially against your competitions, is always a good thing to do. Oh, we already talked about this because it's so important, but yeah, participant diversity, making sure that the people who are participating in your research align with the diversity that you're hoping to find. That's important. Right now, this is a huge gap. Asia and Africa are not represented in user testing's participant pool. So I hope this changes as they merge with UserZoom, as user testing and UserZoom merge. I hope this will change, but this is something I wanted to call out and recognize. Yeah, this is too bad. There are they're always adding new languages to user testing, and I think that's great. Dscout is another online platform that you might want to check out. And just, I don't know, if you're feeling confident about your content principles, if you think your content is clear enough, go ahead and fire up a trial of one of these and see what you do, see what you can do. Yeah, this is one of the controversial quotes that was on Twitter recently. Humanity Centered is doing great work around UX and diversity, and we're calling out. They're one of the organizations that was calling out some of the Nielsen Norman issues. Okay, going to dive into a sample content test to try to bring it to life for all of you. This is my friend Tracy, who works at Zipline, which is a drone company. I think this sounds like a fun place to work. Sounds like a really fun place to work. She went to Button in 2021 and saw one of my workshops on content research. And then she decided to try it out on some of her most important content. There's a word that she saw time and time again. It was in her style guide. She saw it on her first day. This word jumped out at her. It's not quite sitting right. Her spidey sense went off. And the term is upper field. Now, this has to do with the drones, like the ranges of land that the drones can cover, I guess. Like this is a very company specific term. And she wanted to know, she actually was very ambitious and asked about 70 customers what they thought about, what term would they use to describe this thing? And so she asked them, this is her multiple choice question, which word would you use to describe the people who support multiple field locations? Upper field, one word, upper field, two words. It's all different all over her site and app. She said it was inconsistent all over the place. That drove her nuts too. So this was another reason why she thought it was worth testing. What the customers think about field leaders? Is that an option? Were people not sure? Do they have another idea to suggest? This is a great way to hear directly from your customers. Maybe they've got a better idea than you or your PM or your design team or researchers can even come up with. Maybe ask your customers for their input. And then she did the 1-2 punch. She did the quantitative multiple choice question, followed immediately by a tell us why. Tell us why you chose the answer you did. And this was really, really fascinating. The what and the why is the magic formula. Ask people what they're thinking and then ask them why. She found that upper field was really not cool, not something that her customers would choose. They overwhelmingly suggested field leaders would be their preferred term for this definition. So 57%, that's not so much more than half, but clearly the vast majority of participants in the study were pretty cool with field leaders. And I think that's, it's fascinating to think about. This term was used on her website for over 3 years with anyone questioning it. She had that, when you're new to a role, I'm feeling this right now in my role, like, what is going on? Why, if you see a word that doesn't quite feel right, how did it get into the style guide? Someone did their best job, creating your style guide, creating your design library. But this was a subjective choice that came from, I don't know quite who chose this for her company, but they weren't thinking of the customer. This is jargon. And what she found from the qualitative feedback, this is a lot to read. Qualitative feedback takes a long time to comb through, but someone was so confused by upper field, they thought that she was referring to her phone screen. Like they thought they meant like the upper corner of the phone, like upper, they thought it was a UX directional. They didn't think it was even a term that had anything to do with drones or the product or anything. And so this customer, they're sure as hell not going to pony up for the fancier features. They're feeling confused when they're on this app or website, so confused. Now, this is going to, combing through qualitative feedback like this takes a long time. I like to use a highlighter. I like to actually use a printout of the feedback to go through with a highlighter if I can, to identify the keywords and input that's popping out with this feedback. But honestly, I don't fully understand the feature. This customer is feeling unconfident. This customer's feeling stupid. And that's not cool. That's not cool at all. Now, not all 70 customers felt this way, but this jumped out as a big problem. Like clearly, this term needed to be replaced on the website. They thought it was a directional. Their they're not loving their time on this app or website. So that's going to mean they're not going to come and visit as often. The stickiness, all those metrics that you're looking at, repeat visitors, loyalty, retention, going to be affected by this. So yeah,
Were those all current visitors? I'm sorry, current customers that were interviewed? Okay.
Yeah, and so she got the names and addresses from her customer experience team and got permission to directly, plug these names into, like, use a survey tool and contact these customers directly. That was, that's a lot. You don't have to test with 70. You can kind of, I don't know, 10, 20 can give you directional data. Now, this is not statistically significant. I know we're probably all bombarded by teammates who want to run A/B experiments. To me, you don't want to run an A/B experiment on content that hasn't been validated. Or you can inform your A/B experiments with your content research, this rainbow section here. Those are all suggestions of other terms that customers are throwing out. Like, I would suggest this. 77 responses. That's a lot of options, but clearly, like, field leaders, she felt that was the right term because it felt, it's talking about people. Like, she felt like this was the clearer term, and her hunch was validated by this experiment or this study. So I think this was, she found it very valuable. And I'll get into a little bit of humor. So this is concerning. Like, people, when customers feel stupid or less than, you're gonna lose their loyalty. But I think the interesting part was that some people felt it was classist, like upper field kind of sounds like upper class. And so there's this subtext of classism. You would never know this from thinking hard, like meeting with your content team and talking about this term. Everyone's biased, and we all come with our own experiences and valuable feedback and all that. But you probably would not know this until you asked your customers, what do you think? What do you think of the content? This is one of those golden nuggets of insights that you get from content testing, that they thought it was classist. That hurts. And that's going to affect your conversion, your click-through, your customer engagement metrics. I find this flabbergasting. I was super surprised. So Tracy said she shared this information with her company. It's quite small, but people were like, "You're kidding me." They couldn't believe the feedback about the directional, like upper field. They thought it was, you click in the upper. That's just so confounding and so confusing that people just didn't even understand what the heck it was. That it's a person. It's a person, not a click here kind of thing. And she got lots of head exploding emoji reactions on Slack when she shared this information with the company. So that got a lot of attention. She got a lot of attention from her PMs, from her design compatriots, and she was asked, "Could we do more of this?" Like, wow, that was really enlightening. That was really useful. This is a term that's all over the app, the website, the help content, documentation, marketing materials. It's all over the place. The annual report, like, it's everywhere. And to replace it in all those places was time consuming. So this is another thing you got to prepare yourself. If you're going to do content research, you got to be ready to make the changes. If the content research insights indicate you need to do some changes, you have to be able to do that. And if you need to enlist engineering, if you can hop into your CMS and do it yourself, fantastic. But if you need to enlist your coworkers in engineering and other teams, marketing, PR, internal comms, if it's on your intranet, you need to have a plan to roll out the changes in a timely way, in a coordinated way to make it happen. Yeah, onboarding materials, help center. This was, I forget how many hundreds of times that it had to be replaced, but it was, her team was scrappy and small enough that she, tapped the shoulder of her engineering coworker and said, "Hey, can you help make this happen?" And they made it happen. But this was a big change for a small company that made a big difference in the customer experience. She didn't have data on how much better the engagement was on the website or things like that from this one change, but this was moving in the right direction, getting the customer data, engaging with the customers, listening to the customers, and getting more buzz around the practice of content at her company. So people understood that she's just not pulling word choices out of the sky and being arbitrary about it, but she's being thoughtful, methodical, customer-centric, sensitive about these changes that will impact the customer experience. So that is Zipline. That is Tracy's little content study at Zipline. Let's talk a little bit about finding time. I don't know, how many of you are on 5 or more products? Anyone want to raise your hand? It's working in content is hard. We are spread thin, and it's really hard to find time to do this. This is a time, especially digging in. Yeah, Ariel, like, let's just acknowledge let's have a sip of our tea, collectively have a sip of the beverage that we're drinking, and just acknowledge that working in content, we are spread thin. We're asked to do too much. And this is another thing on your plate. If you're going to dive in and do content research, this is another thing. Can you take something off of your plate to put something on your plate that will probably drive more impact, probably bring more energy to your life? I like to complain about office hours. Office hours, the context switching. Can you get rid of your office hours? Can you? Who's forcing you to hold them? Do you have to do office hours? What would your life look like if you didn't do them? Is that a fantasy, or is that something that you can make a reality? I think when you're diving into content research, please pace yourself, create a backlog of words and phrases and content that you'd like to investigate and study. See if you can work it into your sprints. Can you carve out 10% of your time for content research? With the help of your PMs, with the help of people on your team, can they support you? If you run like a pilot test, Tracy's, that was her first stab. That upper field field leader study was her very first content study that made a big splash, created a lot of energy, got her a lot of attention. And people were like, do more of this. We want you to do a lot more of this. Can you take office hours off of your plate and devote, even 2 or 3 hours a week to content research? I think if you do that, if you give yourself permission to do that, I don't think you're going to get fired if you get rid of your office hours and replace that time with content research. I think you'll find you're more energized. Your coworkers are excited. You will probably hear from people from different departments around your company who are intrigued or get wind of, when you share your results, whether you just shared in Slack like Tracy did, or if you email, if you have a formal kind of reporting system, however you share, and let your coworkers know that this is something that's happening, you're going to get more attention, and it's going to feel good. It's going to feel good. It's going to make you think, why don't I just do content testing all day long? I've often fantasized like, oh, wouldn't it be great to just have a team that does content research? Or can you help carve out with your research team? Can you insert more content research into your research team's roadmap too? If they're running, if they're doing interviews, if they're doing outreach to customers, if they're doing research in any way, shape, or form that's related to what you're looking to dive into, like what content you want to analyze, can you collaborate with them and collectively put forth like more of a full court press for content focused research? That's something you can do too. It is hard, but I think we get so blindsided by our workload and all the people pinging us. If you can put yourself on do not disturb and create a test and put it out there and spend a little time watching the videos that come in with the platform, or just looking at the surveys that you send out, looking at that research, the findings that you get, it's really fascinating. And I think it makes content design and content strategy feel lighter, which is, it makes it feel easier, which is huge. If you think of how heavy our day-to-day work can feel, this is a way to paradoxically put more work on your plate to lighten your load. It doesn't make any sense. I totally realize that, but I found it to be something like, I want to put content research in every sprint because it is valuable. My PMs would support me and say, yes, this is something that we should do. The designers were like, this makes our job easier if we know what to say and we can design and get all the Figma files ready faster. It can really help speed things along and improve your velocity, surprisingly. So that's, I don't know, if anyone saw my button presentation, I get on a high horse about office hours because you don't ask your designers often to do office hours. You sure don't ask your product managers to do office hours. So why us as content designers? Why? Change the paradigm, see if we can get rid of them, because the context switching is too much. I'll talk a little bit about stakeholder management. When you're thinking about what content you want to research, try to map it to your company goals, your team goals as much as possible. If you're launching a new product, a new feature, that is the perfect thing to conduct testing on if you can do it in a way that isn't going to reveal, like if you're working on a huge top secret project that no one can hear about until it launches, you don't want to do content research on that necessarily. But if you're working on something smaller in scope that you want to get feedback on before you launch, do it. So you can say out of the gate, you're launching with a more effective user experience than you would have if you hadn't tested it. Let your friends in marketing, PR, social media, advertising, however big your company is, think about all the people who make content. If you have a community of practice for all folks who make content in your organization, that's a perfect place to talk about how to approach content research and let people know what's in progress so they're not surprised. You don't want to have a result from content research, whether it's positive and awesome or a little off-putting. And, I wouldn't say that Tracy's results were negative, but they were surprising and kind of gobsmacking to the team, like stop people in their tracks. You're going to get positive results. You're going to get surprising results. You need to communicate those with tact and diplomacy. And the more people that you have on your side to help with that communication, the better. And if you can use a RACI framework or something like that, where you don't want 100 people weighing in on your test plan. You want to make sure that there's just a handful of people who are involved with any particular study, so you can actually get it out the door. If you have a test plan with like, these are the 2 questions we want to ask, or 4 questions, or 6, or however many, and you want to share your test plan with these people, you want to get feedback and be transparent and open and collaborative, but you don't want to be weighed down or slowed down by 100 people, everyone jumping on the bandwagon to give their 2 cents, because then you'll never be able to launch your test or let alone analyze it and get those insights. So yeah, RACI is really helpful to limit the number. Like I try to keep it to like 6 people at most for most of the studies that I run. I think what I mentioned this earlier on, but UX research is your friend. I am forever indebted to the UX research team at Microsoft for helping embrace content research at Microsoft. We had a wiki where we'd read our studies, we'd read our reports up after a study was run and put meta tagging on it so we could search by content research was a category on their wiki of all their user research. So really helpful to show the body of work that the team was producing and to have that category we could actually search on content research specifically. That was amazing. But got a lot of people, as they learned how to do content research, we'd bounce our study plans off of the research team and say, is this on the right track? Does this look good? And they'd say, tweak this here, do that. We didn't want to weigh them down. Like they've got enough to do. I think research is like content spread thin, don't have all the time in the world to add more work to their plates. But we got a lot of really helpful feedback from the research team before we ran our studies. And then as we were learning how to write up our studies, that we're exercising a muscle that we didn't have. They came to our rescue a lot of times, helping us organize the results, show the insights, talk about the methodology in as brief a way as possible so we could keep going and keep doing studies and keep cranking them out, because the insights we were uncovering were so powerful and so awesome. Yeah, you don't want to surprise anyone. And if you're researching content, if you're doing studies on content that's already customer facing, it's not a new project or a feature, you might be criticizing your own work. You might be criticizing your coworkers' work. Just have to be gentle. If the feedback comes back from customers saying this is not clear, or anything that could be construed even slightly in a negative light, you want to be super sensitive when you're sharing the results so you're not shooting yourself in the foot or offending your coworkers or anything like that. You also don't want to let your senior leadership or anyone think that the content team doesn't know what they're doing. As I was sharing, I was on a content marketing team at Microsoft before I joined content design. And we shared with the general manager, hey, look at all this research that we're running on our content. And he was like, well, why wasn't it awesome to start with? And that's a typical, senior leadership kind of comment of, well, why weren't you doing better? And that hurt. Number one, it hurt. But we realized that we needed to be more more thoughtful and more tactful as we shared executive summaries of our research to let them know, like, hey, we did a good job. We worked with what we had when we initially launched this content. We're making it better iteratively. No one's perfect, but I think not everyone understands content, and senior leadership often totally doesn't understand content. We had to walk this fine line of letting them know we're iterating and improving and driving better conversion and doing all these great things. The content was doing pretty good. It, like on a scale of 1 to 10, it was like, 7 or 8. It wasn't a 10. We're trying to make it a 10. It wasn't a 4 or 5. So we had to set expectations and just be very politic and careful as we share it out. A lot of people, like marketing team, would come to me and say, can you spin up a test? I know you can get results really quickly. Can you do a test for me this morning? I need to know by noon. I'm having a meeting with so-and-so. And I had to say, nope. And this is the Heisman Trophy. I had to say, no, stake my, draw a boundary around my own body and say, no, I can't do your work for you. Go talk to the research team and see if you can get access to, or talk to your finance team and see if you can get access to user testing and do your own studies. It's great to be kind of suddenly very popular, but too many people were coming to my team asking for help. That was inappropriate. Like, I want to help marketing, but I can't do their job for them. They started to exercise their content testing muscle in the marketing world. We would collaborate a lot, but you'll be amazed at how many people, if you start doing research and sharing results, people will come to you and say, hey, you know how to do that? Can you do that for me? Say no, and just, stand your ground. Really quickly, I know we're getting a little late. I think some of the math, like I shared, Trudy's example of the invoice, how she's saving Microsoft a lot of money. This is a great book, Yale Ben David's Business of UX Writing. She has examples in here of, really big rock projects that are driving hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars of impact. So this is exciting. You might not have as big a company. Microsoft is a huge company. Of course, the impact we're driving was kind of similarly sized. If you have a smaller company, the results might not be as dramatic, but they'll still be very important to your company. I think the example that Yale shares is the CTA button. This is actually, I think this is a Jared Spool example. There's a CTA that says register and a CTA that says continue. And you wouldn't think that there would be such a dramatic difference. This could have been an AV experiment, but testing it in user testing or user Zoom or an online survey tool would be much faster than an AV test, AV experiment, I should say. It's so hard to keep the terminology straight. But register turned out to be such a deterrent to people that this is a $300 million button. People did not want to register. They did not want to share their personal information. And this is Jared Spool. He's so funny. I love him. You wouldn't think that would be such a big difference in this particular case, but very dramatic change in CTA engagement just with the change of a word. And that's, I love that example too. This is a little math. I don't know if I'm a math phobic, maybe, but if you know your average cost for customer service contact, and you can calculate how many customer service calls you prevent, how many fewer there are because of your work, you can calculate some awesomeness. And you can just do a little math, like if it's $75 for a call and there are 100 fewer calls after you make a content change, if you can get this kind of level of detail, that's not a huge number monthly, but if you extrapolate it to the year, that's a big chunk of change. And like 90,000 a year, that's almost 100,000. 200, like after 2 years, that's 200,000 in savings. That's pretty awesome. That might hire another content designer for your team, wouldn't it? If you can share this kind of information, this is the kind of data that gets CEOs' ears to perk up and will help you drive more impact as a content designer or a content strategist. And I talked way too long, I'm sorry. Could talk about this for a long time, but yeah, that's in a nutshell, a little bit about content research and how awesome it can be for you and your team.
That's great.
You're
Thanks,
so much,
Erica.
Erica.
I think we still have we've got a few more questions in the chat. Ariel, or do you want to?
Yeah, just a couple more questions came through.
Do it.
Would be fun to hear your thoughts on. Heidi asks, a question about minimum participants. You kind of mentioned that some of the studies that you run, you're able to run with more participants and thus have a greater degree of maybe towards statistical significance. But like,
Yeah.
what feels like it gives you at least some direction?
I would lean on my friends in user research for that. Often we just use 10. Often it's just like a litmus test. It is not statistically significant, but I joke in my book that we're not making the next COVID vaccine. We're working on content. You don't need statistical significance to get pointed in the right direction. And it's not like you can't say, the example I shared from Tracy, she could not say 57% of our customers believe this. It's 57% of that 70 that she surveyed on that day, on that point in time, in that snapshot. But it's a great majority. That pie chart speaks for itself, that a majority of her customers believe this is a better term, better word to use. So go forth and use that. Yeah, I think you don't want to quant your qual. You want to be careful how you talk about these results. They are not set in stone. They are not repeatable, but they're repeatable to a point. But you want to be careful how you talk about the results. They are not the end all be all. You can't speak about them in super definite terms like this is our customers have spoken, the majority of our customers say this. It's just helpful information that will help you iterate your content and make it better. It's not gonna you just gotta be careful. That's I hope I'm being clear.
Yeah. That is something that I definitely try to communicate to my teams as well, that, we're not looking for academic, scientific, statistical significance here. What we're looking for is a little guidance.
No, yeah. And I think I bemoan the popularity of A/B experiments in my book because they are awesome. And who doesn't like to, it's all about the content most of the time, right? Some of it's design. I don't want to design, but a lot of the A/B experiments are based in content. It's like this adjective did better, or this verb did better a lot, or this bullet point, it's a lot of it's content based. But A/B experiments take a lot of time. They take resources to set up and you have to babysit them. And then, or they'll crash. You ever have an A/B experiment crash your website? I sure have. So if you can get directional information from a very, like an hour's worth of work, seriously, depending on how, granularly you focus your test, you can get information that you can run with. It's not going to be statistically significant, but does that really matter? Can you influence the way that your product team operates to be more efficient, to speed up your velocity, because life is short? Like make positive change now.
Yeah.
A/B experiments. Oof.
Do you have any thoughts about how the shift to AI would impact content testing?
Well, I think it's the question of that. I think you could use ChatGPT or other AI tools to ask for options that you could include in your multiple choice questions, or if we can talk about scale questions, but that's another type of a quantitative question that I get into in the book. Like on a scale of 1 to 9, how clear is this content to you? Or, you can use ChatGPT the way I've used Visual Thesaurus in the past to drum up alternative words that you can include as options in your tests. Like if you're very creative and you can come up with many different flavors or iterations of a certain term to include in a multiple choice question like that. But if you're stumped, you could lean on ChatGPT to come up with, like what Tracy's, her upper field, she could have typed upper field into ChatGPT and see what are the related terms, what are people talking about. But, you can use other tools too, like Google Search Console, other SEO tools, so many content tools, Google Trends. There's no shortage of tools that you can use. You don't need to use ChatGPT. I'm going to put Visual Thesaurus in the chat is one of my favorites. It's $20 a year. And it's a wonderful, wonderful tool that can help you come up with options to test.
Check that one out.
It's very visually unattractive, but very powerful and very useful.
Nice. Let's see. We had one person who, oh, do you mind showing the slide with the equation in it again?
Oh, yes, math.
Math.
Let's go back. Is the this one?
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
one.
yeah. And this is the yeah, and there's also in the book, I have an example of like old subject. If you have change, if you had an old version of your CTA, like old version of your engagement compared to your new engagement metrics, you do old minus new divided by old times 100. I know it's math, I know. But these are it's a simple formula that can have a lot of can bring a lot of excitement to your content design world. Yeah, this is and I think $75. That's we did at Premier Blue Cross, we did a lot of this math of, I think customer service calls were about 40 or 50, I forget how much they were, but by updating key user experiences, onboarding, sometimes the homepage, the e-commerce experience, doing them one at a time so we can measure the impact and do this math easily was helpful. This is wonderful to partner with your customer service team and help make their lives easier. Maybe you can make it so they don't even have work to do and you can recruit them to your content. Maybe, I don't know. That might be, it depends on how big your company is. I think you might have thousands of customer service reps. I don't know. Depends on your company, but this is super great to see. Like if you want, and that's why it's important to know your launch date. If you get an insight from content testing, update your website, make sure you mark down the date. Maybe your content management system will help you with that. Maybe you're working with engineering and you don't have an easy way to mark when changes were made in your customer facing content. It's really good to know the date. If you can do it on the first of the month, great. If you have to, prorate this, so be it. But it's good to know when you launch an update from insights gleaned from content research.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, math.
I know. But and I keep joking. I was an English major. This is powerful math. This is math. I hope it's easy enough math.
Easy enough, I think. Yeah. It's very useful. Very useful.
It's easier than a SQL query, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Rebecca actually was curious what kind of how much user research you're going to be incorporating into your new role at Chewy, and if you have plans
for a lot. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I interrupted you.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, I just got user testing access today, so I hope a lot. I am fortunate to have a user researcher on my team working with me directly on a couple projects. So there's a lot of discovery that's already happened, but I think it's good to dig in. It's good to not assume. I'm looking at the style guide. And I'm like, how did these words come to be? And I think that's true for almost any content designer, kind of strategist. How did those words get in your style guide? If they're words that you see time and time again, and you're just assuming they're working, and you know what happens when you assume, dig in and find out what's going on there. Figure out what's clear to your customers and what's not, and you might be quite surprised. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we've got
Rebecca's joking. Oh, hi. I know Rebecca from Cranium.
Yeah.
Good to see some Seattle friends. All right. Cranium was such a fun place to work. I hope I'm going to do a lot of content research. I got a lot of other content design work to do, but I think this is, if I didn't have user testing access, I could still make it happen. I think it's, you can get creative. If you don't have endless resources, if you're at a scrappy startup, you don't need these somewhat expensive platforms to do this kind of work. It helps. When I was at Rover, it was a startup that was our finances were tranched to the point where like we were bootstrapped. We were strapped for cash, and we just ran around downtown with clipboards and $5 Starbucks gift cards and asked people to do surveys for us on paper. We were accosting people in front of Whole Foods right there on Westlake and said, "Hey, do you have a dog? Would you talk to me for 5 minutes for a latte?" And nice. That worked really well too. That was very scrappy. It didn't work in the rain so well. When we were getting rained on, we had to make sure we were using waterproof ink on our paper surveys, but got scrappy, got a couple, 5 or 10 coworkers to go get really helpful feedback in an afternoon from potential customers. Yeah.
That's great. That's awesome.
Oh, Katie's got it. Oh, sorry. You want to go ahead and I'm not sure the order of questions that are coming in.
No, do you see one from Katie?
I see Katie about accessibility and inclusivity. Yes.
Oh, Katie, yeah.
That is wonderful question.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yes. And this is something, if you have an accessibility team, that's great. I was just talking to a coworker on the accessibility team at Chewy about how do we make sure that we're testing for users of all abilities? And that's another sensitivity, inclusivity, diversity, equity, and inclusion issue with content research. You want to test with people of all abilities. And that's not always easy. That's something that I think user testing and user Zoom have a lot of room to grow. They're improving. But it would probably be best to you enlist the help of your user research team and or accessibility team if you have one, to make sure that you're testing with people who if they're using screen readers, if they're using assistive devices, magnification, hearing aids. Good to know what assistive devices they're using, and very valuable to understand how that might be affecting their consumption of your content. If you're using magnifiers, are quite common. If you think it's hard writing for mobile, think about like 1/10 of your content being viewable at a time. It changes things. It makes you want to write much more simply, embrace those plain language guidelines that we talked about earlier tonight, and write really, really as tightly and succinctly as you can while still being clear. And that is the tightrope walk that we're walking every day, isn't it? You want to make sure that you're not having gaps in your content, but being super brief and clear. That is hard to do. I think, but that's probably a topic for a whole other book. If someone wants to write a book, do you want to write for Rosenfeld? I'd be happy to introduce you to Lou. It's important. It's important, and currently a gap on many teams.
Nice. We had one.
Yeah.
Question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just looking. Is it Katie? Am I pronouncing your name correctly, Katie? Is it Katie or Kati?
I believe it's Kati.
Is it Kati? Kati, I'm so sorry, I was mispronouncing your name. Kati, yes. I think, it's painful when you can't be as inclusive as you want, but you can just continually improve. I think it's really humbling to watch people. We did a lot of this work at Microsoft. Microsoft has an amazing accessibility team. Jenny Leigh Fleury is their chief accessibility officer, and someone who I would recommend people follow on LinkedIn and Twitter. Really groundbreaking work that they're doing, but also every company should be doing it. It is often difficult to do, but it is well worth it.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, we had one other question from someone who has kind of a funky username, DARCS2. If you want to come off chat or come off mute and clarify yourself or clarify this question, the question says, do you see chat minimizing opportunity to measure ROI, and in parentheses, calls to business per dollar per call? And I think what I'm reading that is as, do you see that things like ChatGPT kind of replacing some of the opportunity to measure how calls or how calls are, how many calls are?
Hi, Ariel. Yes, Steve. You've got it in one. Hello, everyone. I'm
Hi.
Stephen,
Oh, great. Yes, please.
Melbourne in Australia. Yeah, that's exactly what that is alluding to. So, with the likes of ChatGPT and Chat AI in general, possibly taking more of the workload from call centres, does that cloud our opportunity to measure that ROI? So if we can measure a cost per call,
right,
based on a staff member being on that call, is that going to cause us some challenges down the path with
well, I would think
an accurate read?
Yeah, I was just talking with someone who's working on chat at Google, and those, how do I say this diplomatically? The those chat tools still need care and feeding. They still need content, ideally content professionals maintaining them. So, and that's not free. So I think that would require a rework of my formula here, but I'd say, and the term that, such an interesting term, when chatbots stop working and they reach saturation point. Maybe Rebecca can talk about this because I think you're working on some of this at Meta, Rebecca, but they hallucinate. A chatbot that has reached maximum capacity or cannot eloquently, articulately answer your question for you, will start spewing word vomit at you, and that's a terrible customer experience. And I am very curious how over-reliance on chatbots might lead to affecting customer loyalty and retention. I know Amazon's customer service has not been great. When I get a chatbot that can't help me, I'm like, where's my delivery? And it's not helpful at all. And you ask it a question and it sends something completely irrelevant back to you. That is very, very frustrating. And I'd rather have helpful customer service content created by a content designer who's doing awesome work. So yeah, not to be completely biased, but I am biased. I think all the chatbot launches seem to happen right after I publish my book. But I'd say companies are going to overly rely on chatbots at their peril, to their detriment, to the detriment of the customer experience. To be completely practical, like not to be overly defensive of the practice of content design. Yeah.
I have a feeling the question about what Chat GPT means is going to come up in every event we do going forward.
For the rest of the year, probably.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think of it as like, remember when, I don't know, I am in my early 50s. I remember when cable TV came around and people said it's the end of network TV, or, I think about studying communication in grad school when radio, TV did not replace radio. Radio just got different. The internet changed a lot of communication too. I think ChatGPT is not going to replace things. It will change things. It'll take time to understand how those changes are going to show themselves. I'm not super afraid for my job. Exactly. I think, we need to be mindful that this is a game changer and people are going to see it as a way to save a lot of money. That is an assumption. And it's like the fourth time we've talked about assumptions tonight, but yeah.
Well, it will evolve, but yeah,
yeah,
correct that, in the short term, it's hit or miss. I mean, it definitely is.
Yeah. And the person
instances where it, where something is actually usable. And then
I'm skeptical. And mostly because I have been talking to the person who works at Google on their large language model. She's like, I need 5 people on my team. Like, we're not cheap, and I need a whole lot more people to help react to the increase in usage. She's like, I can't do it myself. And she was very, very tired. And she's hearing from executives saying, why isn't the content better? She's like, because people feed the content model. People feed the content model. It's not a magical thing that appears out of the blue. Right. Yeah. So
coming up in academia a lot too right now.
Yeah. So I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm curious. I will come up with a new formula and share it with you if I can. But yeah, that I'd say maybe we'd be saving even more money if the care and feeding of the LLMs and the chatbots is more expensive than customer service teams.
Right. Well, we are pretty much at time here. I want to make sure that everyone is aware that if you go to rosenfeldmedia.com and find Erica's book, and I'm sorry, I was doing a quick search trying to find the link and I didn't have it handy, but use Seattle 15 as the promo code. You can get a 15% discount on that. So encourage everybody to get Erica's book, and I'd like to thank Erica for
thank you, everyone,
with us tonight. It's been really
keep fighting the good fight for good content.
Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
See you next month.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.